All right, so this is going to be episode one of deck profiles for Scarlet and Violet to journey together. This episode is going to be about Volcanion Magmortar. All right, so April 11th was rotation. So all the cards from F block got rotated into expanded. And so now we're playing from G block and on. And with it came a huge tide of decks um, leaving standard and no longer being um, viable in the standard format, right? Um, so last weekend we had first regional for uh, Starling Virus to join together, and so kind of got to see sort of what people sort of lean towards with rotation, right? Thankfully, before rotation, there was a special set to come out to sort of alleviate, um, a lot of the, kind of panic that ensues when rotation hits. So they gave us some kind of buffer cards to sort of help ease us in to rotation, namely Badu and like Reggie Gigas and stuff like that. And so people were able to transition away from, a lot of stuff that was uh, dominating certain sparks and, able to, test some stuff that would be probably better in um, Scarlet and Violet to journey together, right? Namely Dragapult and Rage and Bolt, right? So yeah, thankfully, um, since moving from certain sparks to prismatic evolutions, we saw a lot of decks sort of die down in popularity, namely Regidrago and Charizard, and so that helped with people transitioning right into playing without those decks, right? Since people were crutching on those decks for you know for Regidrago, a number of months, for Charizard, practically since it was released, right? And so yeah, that was very good, right? For players to be able to, ease away from those decks, yet them being still very powerful in prismatic evolutions, right? And so yeah. So Atlanta, if you didn't catch it, I think day one, the top deck was Dragapult, and it was like 41% meta share or something like that. Then followed by Rage and Bolt, right, which was no surprise. So those decks converted pretty decently well into day two, right? Dragon Ball was like 30%, and then I think Raging Bull was like 14 or 15% or something like that. Yeah, and those are definitely the decks to beat. Um, the way Pokemon has designed this format is that they've really leaned into the theme of dragons being the strongest um type in, right? Followed by, like psychic, right? And that's sort of the theme of the VGC as well, right? Um, if you're familiar with the core games, you know that Dragon is generally considered the most powerful for offensive typing, followed by Psychic, right? Just due to their the types that resist them. For example, in Generation One, Psychic was resisted by nothing except for Psychic, right? And so it had a very good offensive typing spread, right? And then Dragon was resisted by nothing, right? And so Pokemon definitely leaned into that theme a lot for Scarlet and Violet. Um, so it's no surprise to see, Dragapult and Raging Bolt, and Gardevoir being, you know, arguably the three strongest decks, in this format, right? Um, Gardevoir mainly because of the addition of the Lily's Clefairy tech, but still, even without Lily's Clefairy, Gardevoir still can hit numbers, right? With Bravery Charm on Drift Bloom, you can still hit 300. Um, and so yeah, even without Lily's Clefairy, right? It's just Lily's Clefairy just gives it a whole nother edge, right? And that you can um basically kind of like Gardevoir and Obsidian Flames, right? Where they were playing the Deoxys V Star tech to KO Charizard in early game, right? So yeah, even just even without Lily's Clefairy, Gardevoir could still hold its own, right? So yeah, very nice to see Pokemon sort of lean into that theme that um is in their core games, and that Dragon and Psychic are like the best offensive typings. And so um so Dragapult and Raging Bull are definitely the decks to beat, right? Um yeah. So all that aside, Journey Together was the introduction of partner Pokemon into the Scarlet and Violet era, right? And so we got like the Blaze Pokemon, right? Um we got the Hops Pokemon, right? We got the Ionos Pokemon, right? And so these are like, the flagship archetypes for the partner Pokemon mechanic that they're reintroducing. That was introduced in Generation 2, right? And like I think it was Neo Genesis, if I'm not mistaken. They printed the Rockets Pokemon. Oh no, I think it might have been Team Rocket Strike Back, but or Team Rocket. It was some Team Rocket set. But yeah. Um so yeah, these are the flagships archetypes for the partner Pokemon. Um and with it they also, printed a lot of other archetypes to sort of um ease people in to playing those archetypes that they already had printed in Scarlet and Violet, right? So Charizard, not having its consistent setup through like Luminion and stuff like that. People definitely are shying away from it now. So instead, they printed, you know, Mammal Swine, right? Mammal Swine kind of has a similar attack to Charizard, right? 2 energy cost and 180 plus, right? Except its ability searches a Pokemon instead of setting it up, right? So it's definitely more of a high maintenance Pokemon than Charizard, right? But arguably it's stronger because it scales better, right? If like for example, obviously you can't compare, Scarlet and Violet's Journey Together Charizard to like Brilliant Stars Charizard, right? Because you didn't have like Forest Steel Stone and stuff like that. But arguably this archetype would scale better because it would be much harder to break this board once you set up a Mammoth Swine, right? Compared to like a Charizard, right, where you just kill the Charizard and then they can't just set it up, right? Because they would need like the candy, and then they need the Charizard, and then they need the energies, and then they need the other Charmander and stuff like that. So compared to Charizard, arguably Magmortar is a more consistent stage 2, right? So that's good to see, right? And you don't need like the dust noise and stuff like that to get like cheap knockouts in the early game. So yeah, got Magmort, Magma Swine, um, and also got also I didn't mention Ends Pokemon. Yeah. So yeah, they had Ends Pokemon too, right? So yeah, with Ends Pokemon they reprinted Zorak, right? Trade Zorak played in Shining Legends when they printed Zorak GX has the ability to trade. You must discard a card from your hand in order to use this ability. And once during your turn, you may draw 2 cards. Then it has the attack Night Joker, choose one of your bench ends Pokemon's attack and use it as this attack. Right? So this attack is actually the attack that ends Zorak GX had, except it was its GX ability. It's the exact same energy cost, double dark, except I think Zorak was choose one of your opponent's Pokemon's attack and copy it, whereas this is choose one of your bench ends Pokemon, right? So yeah, they wanted to lean more into Zorak's theme with Zorak's GX, and Zorak in the games, they it copies uh the appearance of the last Pokemon in your party, right? So they gave the attack that let you copy one of your opponent's Pokemon. In this case, now it can copy your own Pokemon, so it's kind of more closer to Zorak's theme. So that's good to see, right? So yeah, and so yeah, they had Mamoswine. Um, and we got a few like tech cards for certain archetypes, right? For Lightning, we got Tapu Koko, right? And for Dunsparce, we got the Dunsparce, right? So we got a lot of interesting stuff coming out from Journey Together, right? To sort of support archetypes that may have lost some power due to the rotation, right? So yeah, amongst the archetypes though that got printed and journeyed together was also Volcanion, right? So Volcanion needs no introduction if you play the TCG, right? But this Volcanion is Volcanion EX. It's 220 HP basic Pokemon, basic fire Pokemon. Has the ability Scald and Steam. Once during your turn, this Pokemon is in the active spot and make your opponent's active Pokemon burn, right? It has the attack Scorching Cyclone for 2 fire and colorless. Does 160. Moving energy from this Pokemon to one of your bench Pokemon. Right? So on paper, this card seems, very um kind of convoluted, right? Um, but if you understand kind of what Pokemon is trying to accomplish with this archetype, as opposed to previous Volcanic archetypes, then it makes a lot more sense, right? So you know, last competitive Volcanion came out was sort of similar to this one in terms of the type of deck it is, right? That was Sun and Moon Unbroken Bonds. It was the Volcanion. It was a baby Volcanion. Um, yeah, and it was 120 fire basic. It had the attack Flare Starter. Search your deck for a fire energy and attach it to one of your Pokemon. If you go second, it's your first turn. Instead, search up to 3 fire energy cards and attach them to your Pokemon any way you like, right? And then search your deck. So, and shuffle your deck. And had the attack High Heat Blast for 50 plus for 2 fires. If you have at least 4 energy in play, this attack does 60 more damage, right? So, and then the Volcanion they had previous to that was Steam Siege, and it was Volcanion EX. This is a different role for EXs though. But yeah, it was Volcanion EX. This was a dual type Volcanion EX, water and fire type, and had the ability Steam Up. Once during your turn, you may discard a fire energy card from your hand. You do during your turn. During this turn, your basic fire Pokemon's attacks do 30 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. Right. So, and then I had the attack Volcanic Heat for 130, 2 fire and a colorless. Pokemon can attack during your next turn. Right. So, as opposed to Unbroken Bonds, Volcanic EX, this is definitely more of a turbo deck, right? Just trying to get a lead, quick lead out of your opponent, and then extend it, right? By being able to um just really get through your deck really quickly and take your opponent's board before they can set it up, right? And the Volcanion in Unbroken Bonds is kind of more similar to this Volcanion in Journey Together, right? Where basically you're just trying to set up a board and kind of um make your opponent have to, you know, um kind of guess basically what your lines are gonna be, right? So you can't set up a board where they can't win, right? So yeah, which is basically just checkmate, right? So this Volcanion was more of a checkmate Volcanion, right? And this Volcanion is no different, right? So yeah, and this Volcanion, forgot to mention, was partnered with the tag team Pokemon Eruption Charizard, right? So the idea was that you would use uh Volcanion's first attack to charge up a Reshiram Charizard, and then basically it'd be a checkmate. You'd be able to set up like your first step in your checkmate, right? Is that they can't just bring up this Charizard and attack it because it has 2 energy on it, and this Reshiram Charizard has the attack Outrage, right? So it does 10 more damage for each damage counter on this Pokemon, right? So yeah, this card was kind of a very mystified card when it came out, right? In that, it was played a lot of ways, right? It was definitely supposed to be played as a checkmate style deck, but it also was paired with like Welder, which is a supporter for that set, that let you attach 2 fire energies to your hand from your hand to your Pokemon, and then draw 3 cards, right? So this card could be played more in a turbo style, but it was definitely more designed to be played as a checkmate deck, right? And so yeah, they revived Volcanion with another checkmate style way of playing it, and so yeah, this is gonna kind of help um, explain kind of how this deck is supposed to work, and yeah, what you're supposed to accomplish with this archetype. All right, so I hope you enjoy. So yeah, let's get into it. All right, so Volcanion is has this ability that lets you burn a Pokemon, right? So if you're familiar with burns, in the Pokemon TCG, you know that burns are status that you can put on the active Pokemon, and you um when during Pokemon checkup, right, which is basically like the standby phase if you play like Yu-Gi-Oh, for example, for your opponent's turn, right? The Pokemon that's burned takes 20 damage, right? And then they flip a coin, and if they flip heads, the burn is healed, and if they flip tails, then they are still burned, right? Then the way you can heal burns besides flipping heads on Pokemon Checkup is by retreating the Pokemon that's burnt to the bench, and then the burn is just gone, right? So yeah, normally burns just do 20 damage, right? But they have this uh stage one Magmortar in this set, um with the ability Magma Surge. So Magmortar, stage one, 130 HP fire type, has the ability Magma Surge. During your Pokemon checkup, put 3 more damage counters on your opponent's burned Pokemon, right? And then it has the attack Serum Flame for 90 damage. Flip a coin if head your active Pokemon is burned, right? So attack aside, what this ability does basically is that um, when your opponent's burned and this Pokemon is on the board, then your opponent takes 30 more damage. Um, when they during Pokemon checkup, right? So instead of doing 20 damage with the burn, it'll do 50 damage, right? And so if you notice something in this ability, it doesn't specify, you know, compared to ability like for example, Togekiss from Surgeon Sparks has the ability Wonder Kiss. When your opponent's active Pokemon is knocked out, flip a coin. If heads, take 1 more prize card. The effect of Wonder Kiss does not stack, right? So in this ability, right, it specifies that the ability doesn't stack, right? So for example, if I had 2 Togekiss and I flip the heads, right, then I wouldn't be able to flip again for the second Togekiss. The effect with the ability would just be done, right? So yeah, that's what it means by the effect. It doesn't mean that if you have 2 Togekiss, you can't flip both. It's just that if the effect goes through of the ability, then you can't flip again. Right? That's basically what it's trying to say when it says the effect of Wonder Kiss doesn't stack. Right? So for this ability, it doesn't specify that, right? So theoretically, if you put down 2 Magmortars, um, during Pokemon checkup, instead of taking 50 damage from burn, if you have 1 Magmortar, now your opponent's Pokemon is taking 80 damage from the burn, right? So how would you set that up, right? So Pokemon has given a lot of support for evolution decks throughout Scarlet and Violet. In particular, they printed technical machines again, right? So in this iteration of technical machines, um, these technical machines are trying to basically um, make board states that would be favorable for evolution decks against more fast like basic oriented decks, right? So technical machine evolution, right? Um, has the attack gives you the attack when it's attached to the Pokemon. Evolution for colorless energy. Choose up to 2 of your bench Pokemon for each of those Pokemon. Choose your deck for a card that evolves from that Pokemon and put onto that Pokemon to evolve it. Then shuffle your deck, right? So again, right, the question I asked was, so how would you set up, you know, this Volcanion Magmortar combo, right? So what you would do, right, is for example, if you're going second, right, on your first turn, you would theoretically open up Volcanion, right? And theoretically you'd have like a Magmar or some out to Magmar like Nest Ball or Ultra Ball, right? And then you would um have an Arvin, right? And Arvin would search you for another Nest Ball or another Ultra Ball, preferably a Nest Ball. And then the tool card you would search as Evolution, and theoretically you'd have an energy in your hand, right? And what you would do is you would promote the Volcanion, use Scald Steam on that Pokemon, on the active Pokemon. Then you would bench the Magmar, and then bench the second Magmar with Nest Ball, or if it's just in your hand. and then you would attach the fire, then you would attach the evolution, and then you would use evolution on the two Magmars so that going into your opponent's turn, during Pokemon checkup, they're taking 80 damage from the burn, right? So this seems, very, lucky to get, but you understand kind of checkmate style decks, right? You understand that like it's not supposed to be some sort of, very straightforward, very, linear win condition, right? Checkmate decks take a lot of planning, to win with, and it's not just a matter of trying to win on your first turn or just not letting your opponent play the game so you can just set up your board however you feel. It's planning, reading your opponent's board state and reading your board state relative to your opponent's board state so that you can set up the checkmate, right? So it's not like yeah, it's not like something where, your opponent can't play the game, right? It's like it almost feels like sometimes when people are trying to make checkmate decks, it's like they're basically theorizing a game of chess in which your opponent, for every move like your opponent takes, you take like three moves or something like that. Or something ridiculous like that, where it's like basically you're theorizing a situation where your opponent just cannot play the game, right? That's basically what you're doing, right? It's not some sort of creative process you're doing. It's literally just you theorizing some convoluted way in which your opponent can't play the game and making it just sound very confusing and all over the place. So it sounds like it's really creative, but it's really just you're theorizing how can I make my opponent not be able to play the game so that I can win. That's literally it, right? And it's this sort of, mindset that basically makes it hard for people to play checkmate decks, right? Because, obviously, with the rotation, right, we lost, um, the premier checkmate deck for that format, which was uh, Lost Zone, right? With like Comfy, Cramorant, Sableye, right? And so people who were, very invested in checkmate, you know, kind of feel like this void, right? But there's not really a void, right? Because you've been testing this format since, for example, Paradox Rift, right? You're very familiar with, a lot of the checkmate archetypes um, that exist in the format, right? Like, for example, Future, right? The whole Future line of cards is a um is a archive of a checkmate archetype, right? So I covered these archetypes in Brilliant Stars to Surge Sparks, and so yeah, it's not like there aren't checkmate decks, besides Lost Zone, even in that format, right? So yeah, right. Um, it all just boils down to testing, right? And so yeah, it seems like this deck is, you know, oh my gosh, yeah, if you get the Volcanion, then you and you get the Volcanion, you get the Magmars, you get the Evo, you get the energy, then you get the 80 damage on turn one. But are you gonna get it? Are you gonna get it, right? And it's like you have to understand odds, right? Like you have to fix the odds in your favor so that you can get it. You can't just say, I'm never gonna get it, right? Like again, right? This is checkmate, right? So it's not about, oh, I have raging bolts, you know. right? I have, Ogre Ponds, right? And then I just attack with Bellwind Thunder, and my opponent can't play the game because I can hit any number, right? That's not even checkmate, actually. It's just a very good combo deck. But, yeah, right? Um, checkmate is much different than combo, right? So it's just important to make that distinction so that, when you're theorizing how you're going to play this deck, right? You don't paint yourself into a corner by saying, "Oh, how do I get to Volcanion and two Magmars on the bench, right? And then get the fire and get the evolution, right?" So yeah, that's kind of my spiel on checkmate, and so um, now I can get into the list, right? So this list plays three Volcanion EX, right? Um, and it's because basically how you want to play the deck is that you want to um, basically start with the Volcanion, right? So that's one, right? And then you attach to it, you use the Evo, and then you um, theoretically get your first knockout on like a basic, like a Dreep, for example. Then you'd basically use Latias, if you play one copy of, to give all your basic Pokemon free retreat. And you bench your second Volcanion, right? Then you promote this Volcanion, right? And you um, use Scald Steam again, right? Except this Volcanion you're not attaching to it, right? This is just for Scald Steam, right? And the first Volcanion is the Volcanion you're gonna attach to, right? So you attach and it has two energies on it, right? And then your second Volcanion has one energy on it. I mean, has no energy on it, right? Then theoretically, you've taken two prizes here, but your opponent um is probably set up and they can probably knock out the active Volcanion, right? And so they knock it out, right? And then you have your bench Volcanion, your first Volcanion, and it has two energies on it. You attach the third energy, right? And then you can attack, right? Probably you're going to be able to hit a two prizer, right? And you KO it, right? Because it's just 240. So theoretically, let's say for example, you're going to be playing against a Raging Bolt, right? Raging Bolt is 240, so 60 plus 80 is 240, right? So you knock out the Raging Bolt, right? Then its attack moves an energy, right? And you would be moving the energy to a Blood Moon Ursaluna, right? So Blood Moon Ursaluna has the ability Season Skill. Um, Blood Moon used by this Pokemon costs one of the colors less for each pride card your opponent's taken, right? And it has attack Blood Moon for five colors energy. It's just 240. And during the next turn, this Pokemon can attack, right? So you move the energy from the second Volcanion onto your Blood Moon Saluna, and then um, if they knock out this Volcanion, right, then um, you promote the third Volcanion that you'd have, right? Probably through some sort of switch effect or through having a just third bench Volcanion, and then you burn with Scald Steam, promote the Blood Moon Saluna, and then you use Season Skill. I mean, you use Blood Moon. That's 240 plus 80 is 320, which is basically every number in this format, right? Since Dragon Ball is 320, right? And it's checkmate because you have one energy on the Blood Moon, right? And then you have two energies on the second Volcanion, right? That so if they knock out the active Volcanion, you activate the one energy Blood Moon, and if they knock out the Ursaluna, you have the Volcanion, and you just attach one energy to it, and um, now you can use Scorching Cyclone again, right? And they have to guess, right? Do they have it's really a guess ultimately, right? Because if they guess that you don't have the last energy for Scorch and Cyclone, right, then they knock out your Ursaluna, right? If not, they just knock out your Volcanion and then just hope that you can't knock out the Ursaluna with the Volcanion combo, right? Because I'll explain the bench state, right? You're gonna have two Magmortars, right? You're gonna have the Latios because you need the Latios for free retreat. Um, you're gonna have the Ursaluna, right? Because you need to attach to it. Then you're gonna have probably some sort of drawn Pokemon that you use, right? And this Iron Bundle, it could be Pheasantipity, right? So yeah, that's gonna be your board, right? It's gonna be Latios EX, two Magmortars, right? Ursaluna, and then some sort of draw Pokemon, right? And so that's the checkmate, right? Is that your opponent has to guess, do they have the promote Volcanion and then attack with Blood Moon, or do they have the fire energy for Volcanion, right? So you can see that it's not some sort of like theoretical checkmate where from jump you just win. It's a very elegant, very decisive style of checkmate, right? And so that's kind of what you're trying to go for with this deck, right? So you play three Volcanions because of that, right? Then for the Magmortar lines, you play three Magmars, right? And then you play three Magmortars, right? So this is just so you don't prize a 1-1 line, and then you can't set up the two Magmortar combo. So yeah, right? Then you play one Latias EX, right? This is the fruit tree for the combo. And you play one Squawkabilly EX. This is just so you can get your board set up if you go first. Then you play one Pheasantipity EX again. This can be an Iron Bundle, right? And it's just so that alternatively Iron Bundle can, push a two prizer that they're trying to hide behind and promote a 80 HP or less Pokemon that they're hiding behind, for example, like Dreepy or something like that. And then you can get the continue your momentum, right? As opposed to something like Pheasantipity, which is a more reactive card, right? That you'd want against again a deck like Raging Bolt or Goldengo, for example, right? So it's really just a matter of it's not necessarily a matter of picking your poison, right? Raging Bolt just happens to be a more popular deck, so you'd probably want to play Fez over or Iron Bundle, but at the same time, Dragapult has like 40% meta share, right? And so Iron Bundle would probably be more preferable um to Pheasantipity, right? But again, right? It's just it's a meta call, right? So don't get too hung up on whether you're gonna play Iron Bundle or Pheasantipity, right? So yeah, then play one copy of Mew EX, right? This is just so you can draw right through draw through like Ionos or low hand sizes that you need to get with Ultra Ball or something like that. Then you play two Blood Moon Ursaluna EX, right? So this is you don't prize it, right? This is a very important part of the checkmate. So you don't want to prize it and then not be able to complete the checkmate, right? So that's a Pokemon line. Um, so for the trainers, play four Ultra Ball, four Nest Ball, right? Then you play four Arvin, four Carmine, and three Iono, right? And then you play 3 Pokegears, right? So you're not gonna have a lot of pieces to really search out your trainers very effectively. So you just play a high support account, and then you would just play this Pokegear so that you can just have your pick of the litter, right? Then play for the stadium, play 2 town stores, right? So this deck plays a lot of tools. So you just want to have a stadium bump, and B, just a better out to tools than Arvin, right? If you want to play like an Iona on your turn, um, then you still can be able to search out your tools, right? Um, and then play 2 technical machine evolutions, right? So this is just you don't prize it, and you have better odds to opening it, right? Um, and then play 2 copy of boss. And then Bravey Charms is just so that to facilitate setting up the checkmate. So it basically makes your opponent have to have more outs to out in your board, right? For example, Raging Bolts, right, would only need 4 energies to knock out an Ursaluna. For Bravery Charm, it would need 5, right? And so Goldengo, right, would need only 5 energies to knock out Volcanion, and then with Bravery Charm, it needs 6, right? Those are your main threats in this format. Um, so yeah, 2 copies just so you don't prize it, and you can also just get multiple bravery charms down, right? And so yeah, then we play 1 counter game, right? So counter game is just so that in those matchups again, like Raging Bolts and Goldengo, right? Um, if they break your board really quickly, then counter game can just help you catch back up. So that's kind of what you're trying to go for with this counter game. And you only need 1 copy because, again, right, you're not trying to win matchups that you're not favored in, right? You're trying to win the matchups that you're favored in and trying to go even in the matchups that you're not favored in, right? That's kind of the philosophy you should take in deck building is that you're not trying to win matchups that you're not gonna win normally, right? Because that'll just basically ruin your odds in that um your odds against the decks that you're favored in will go down, and the odds of the decks that you're not favored in will go up, which will make your win rate go down because you're gonna hit more decks right that you're favored in than you're not favored in, generally speaking. And so you don't want to um give yourself better odds against decks that you're not gonna beat. Rather, you want to give yourself better odds against decks that you generally beat so that you have a better win rate overall, right? So just play 1 just for that matchup, right? This is just a tech card, basically, right? So yeah, the A spec for this deck, School Up Cyclone. So again, that combo where you're trying to get the Volcanion active and then promote the Ursaluna is better facilitated with this, and it also helps fix your bench. So, for example, if you open Squawkabilly, you don't want Squawkabilly on your bench anymore, so you can just use Scoop Up Cyclone, right? Again, and also Magmortar, right? The only other way that you can retreat a Magmortar without attaching to it is with Jet Energies, and so again, this is another out to retreat a Magmortar too, right? So you play Scoop Cyclone as your ace spec, then play 1 copy of Mela, right? So this card reads: you can use this card only if any of your Pokemon were knocked out during your opponent's last turn. Attach a basic fire energy from your discard pile to one of your Pokemon. You do draw cards until you have 6 cards in your hand, right? So again, this is just how to catch up in matchups that you're not favored in, Raging Bolts and Goldengo, right? Then play 1 copy Pal Pad, right? Again, checkmate, right? You don't want to not have the pieces for your checkmate, so this is just to reset bosses, reset Ionos, right? And then you have Super Rods to reset a 1 copy Super Rod to reset Magmortar. And then play one vessel so that if the last piece you're missing is an energy, you can just search it with an Arvid, right? And that's your trainer line. And for the energy, play 6 fire and 2 jet energies, right? So this is just so you can charge up theoretically 2 Volcanions, right? So you can get the checkmate, right? And then the 2 jets are so that it's another out to retreat a Magmortar, and it's also another out to setting up the Ursaluna play if you don't have another way to, get the Volcanion down, promote it when you get knocked out, and then promote the Ursaluna, right? So yeah, you can see that this deck is very well put together by the Pokemon Company. They didn't leave anything out that you would need to complete this checkmate, right? It's a very complete deck, right? Um, it's just a matter of understanding the concept of checkmate first of all, then understanding the philosophy behind checkmate, then understanding the execution behind checkmate, right? Then also understanding your alternatives, right? Depending on how the meta shifts, right? So example, right? Instead of Iron Bundle, you can play Fez, right? If you're up against more Raging Bolts and more Godangles, right? And so that's kind of how you want to approach um deck building with checkmate, right? Is that it's not a matter of, you know, how do I make my opponent not play the game? It's a matter of how do I win more, basically, right? And so yeah, that was Volcanion Magmortar. Hope you enjoyed, and thank you for listening, and see you in the next video.